43,000 years ago, in what is now central Spain, someone pressed a finger against a small granite pebble. That finger left a mark in red ochre, and that mark has just changed everything. This isn't just any fingerprint. It's the oldest complete fingerprint ever found. And it wasn't made by one of us. It was made by a Neanderthal. I'm going to tell you the story of how forensic police, statistical simulations, and a stone that looks like a face are rewriting what we thought we knew about our extinct cousins. For over a century, the story was simple. Neanderthals were brutes. Strong, yes. Survivors, certainly. But artists, thinkers, creative beings, that was supposed to be our thing. But what if that story was wrong? What if we've been looking at the evidence all along and missing what it actually meant? This is the story of a single pebble, about the size of your palm, and the 43,000-year-old secret it's been keeping. Let's go back to the beginning. Not 43,000 years, though we'll get there. Let's start with what we thought we knew about Neanderthals. They emerged in Europe and Western Asia around 400,000 years ago. For hundreds of millennia, they thrived, hunting mammoths, weathering ice ages, building fires in the dark. They had brains as large as ours, sometimes larger. They cared for their injured, they buried their dead. But the traditional view held that something was missing. The spark, the impulse to create something purely for meaning's sake. That was the thing, or so we told ourselves, that made Homo sapiens special. When modern humans arrived in Europe around 40,000 years ago, they brought cave paintings, carved figurines, and bone flutes. The Neanderthals, they disappeared within a few thousand years. For decades, that timeline told a convenient story. Art arrived with us. Symbolism was our invention. Creativity, the thing that makes consciousness meaningful, belonged to Homo sapiens alone. But evidence has been accumulating. Neanderthals used pigments, red ochre, manganese dioxide. They collected eagle talons and arranged them as ornaments. And in Spanish caves, they may have painted handprints. Each discovery sparked debate. Were the marks accidental? Were modern humans actually responsible? Skeptics had reasonable ground to stand on. Then, in the Eresma River Valley of Segovia, Spain, archaeologists found something that would be much harder to dismiss. At a site called San Lazaro Rock Shelter within a sediment layer clearly associated with Neanderthal occupation, they recovered a small granite pebble, and on that pebble, a mark. A red mark, ochre pigment. And when forensic experts examined it closely, they found something remarkable, the complete impression of a fingerprint. Not a smudge, not a partial, a complete fingerprint, every whorl, every ridge, pressed into ochre 43,000 years ago. The oldest complete fingerprint ever discovered. Spanish forensic police analyzed the impression. Their conclusion? Quote, no doubt that it was applied to the stone intentionally by a finger dipped in ochre. Not accidental, intentional. Someone dipped their finger in red ochre and pressed it onto the stone on purpose. And that someone wasn't us. The pebble dates to approximately 43,000 years ago. That's crucial because modern humans didn't arrive in the Iberian Peninsula until around 40,000 years ago. 3,000 years before any Homo sapiens set foot in Spain, a Neanderthal pressed their finger onto the stone. But the discovery gets stranger. The stone itself has natural features, two small symmetrical indentations above a larger central indentation. In other words, it looks like a face. And the fingerprint? It was placed precisely between those two eye-like indentations, right where the bridge of a nose would be. Researchers ran Monte Carlo statistical simulations to test whether this placement could be random. The probability that the red dot aligned with the face-like features by chance? 0.31%. Less than 1 in 300. That's not coincidence. That's intention. Someone saw a face in the stone and decided to give it a mark. Spanish cultural official Gonzalo Santoña called it the oldest portable object to be painted on the European continent. More than that, he described it as the only object of portable art painted by Neanderthals. If true, this isn't just old, it's singular. Now I should pause here, because not everyone agrees on what this actually means. Some scholars argue that a single fingerprint, however deliberately placed, doesn't constitute art in any meaningful sense. A mark isn't a painting. A press isn't a sculpture. Others wonder whether we can ever truly distinguish intentional symbolic behavior from other forms of mark-making in the archaeological record. After all, we're reading meaning into 43,000-year-old intentions. But this discovery adds to a growing body of evidence that Neanderthals engaged in symbolic practices, using pigments, collecting ornaments, and possibly creating cave art. The debate isn't really about one pebble. It's about something much larger. What makes us human? And did Neanderthals share that quality? Consider what this fingerprint required. First, someone had to collect ochre, a mineral pigment that doesn't occur naturally at the site. It had to be transported there. Then someone had to recognize that this particular stone, out of countless available, had interesting features. It looked like something. And then, someone pressed a finger into wet pigment and applied it to that stone, not randomly, in a specific location, between the eyes. That's a sequence of intentional choices. That's planning. That's recognizing a pattern, a face, and choosing to enhance it. That's symbolic thought. The term cognitive archaeology describes this exact approach, using artifacts to understand ancient minds. And this pebble may be one of the most revealing windows into Neanderthal cognition we've ever found. Think about what it means to see a face in a stone. Pareidolia, we call it, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns where none exist. We see faces in clouds, in electrical outlets, in toast. It's so automatic that we barely notice we're doing it. Our brains are wired for social recognition, for finding minds in the world around us. If a Neanderthal experienced that same impulse, saw a face in a stone and felt compelled to mark it, what does that tell us about their inner life? It suggests they weren't just surviving, they were experiencing, interpreting, making meaning from the world, just as we do. And they did all of this while we were there. Remember, modern humans wouldn't arrive in Spain for another 3,000 years. This was their world, their art, their expression. For so long, the narrative was clear. Neanderthals went extinct because they couldn't compete, because they lacked something essential that we possessed. But what if their extinction had nothing to do with inferiority? What if it was climate, or disease, or simple bad luck? What if they were our equals, and we just arrived at a bad moment? We'll never know the full answer. But every discovery like this pebble pushes us to reconsider, to question the stories we've told ourselves about who they were, and who we are. So what can we take from this? First, and I think this matters, consider revisiting the popular image of Neanderthals as brutish and unintelligent. The evidence increasingly suggests otherwise. The caricature of the club-wielding brute? That says more about 19th century prejudices than about Neanderthal reality. It's worth letting that image go. If you're curious about this field, you might want to explore cognitive archaeology, the discipline that uses artifacts to understand ancient minds. It's a fascinating intersection of psychology, anthropology, and detective work. And keep watching for new discoveries. Researchers continue to investigate Neanderthal symbolic behavior across European sites, each finding adding pieces to an incomplete puzzle. There's something humbling here too. We share DNA with Neanderthals. Most non-African humans carry 1 to 4% Neanderthal ancestry. They're not just our cousins. They're, in a very real sense, our ancestors. When we dismiss them as primitive, we're dismissing part of ourselves. When we recognize their complexity, we're recognizing something about the breadth of human experience, even before there were humans. 43,000 years ago, someone picked up a stone with a face in it. They collected ochre, a pigment with no practical survival value, and they made a mark that's still visible today. Was it art? Was it decoration? Was it ritual? We can't ask them. The maker has been dead for 430 centuries. But the fingerprint remains, preserved in red ochre on granite, the oldest complete fingerprint ever found, and a window into a mind we barely understand. If this kind of story interests you, the untold moments that reshape what we think we know, hit subscribe. We cover discoveries like this every week. Somewhere in central Spain, in a rock shelter overlooking the Eresma River, a Neanderthal once held a stone. They saw something in it, something worth marking. We can't know what they were thinking, but we know they were thinking something. And maybe that's enough to change how we see them, and ourselves. 43,000 years later, we're still finding their fingerprints, and they're still teaching us something new.